Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Born to Fly podcast. Today we're going to talk about communication, the number one skill to master, according to Professor Laura Mixon Camacho. Laura Mixon Camacho is our guest for today's episode. She is obsessed with coaching leaders to enjoy more productive conversations. A certified introvert, Laura believes all communication should be compelling and carried out with style and enthusiasm. Given that today's professionals are all overworked, overwhelmed, and exhausted, crafting a compelling message to reach them is a much-needed service to humanity. After 10 years in academia and living abroad in 3 different countries, Laura has settled in Charleston, South Carolina, and creates quirky, interactive, and intense culture-building workshops and privately coaches executives to be more influential. In 2009, she founded Mixonian Institute, her company. She is a communications coach for the San Francisco-based Better Up. She is also the author of the Cultured Communication Workbook, and a very new one she added to her list is her book, The Practical Guide to Effective Communication. Enjoy today's episode. Welcome, Laura, on the Born to Fly podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It is my pleasure and honor to be here. You have such amazing guests, and I am thrilled to be among them.
Perfect. So, Laura, what is your story? We're curious to know. How did you end up being a communication coach? But probably it starts way before that.
It does, actually. And I'm going to just give a tiny drip of ancient history with a specific purpose. You know that I'm all about purpose-driven communication, but I am a 4th generation teacher. So that means that my great grandmother, who was born in the 1800s, I don't know what year, she went to college and she was a teacher. She taught on a Native American reservation. And my grandmother also went to college, and she was actually a communication teacher in a high school in Dallas, Texas. My mom majored in English, and she was an English teacher. So the last thing I was going to be was a teacher. So that's why I'm a communication coach. But I did actually teach in the university for a long time. And, coaching and training is just another form of teaching. But I wanted to emphasize something to your audience today because, I'm all about challenging assumptions. And by telling you that I'm a 4th generation teacher, I'm also telling you that I'm a 4th generation strong woman who has been, very family oriented, very strong Christian faith, and also getting things done, being active in the culture and the workforce. And this grandmother of mine who taught at the Native American reservation, she was also a hairdresser for a time, because we all know that teacher salaries are not the best. Mm-hmm. And, her husband died, and my grandmother's husband died. So, there's a lot of this narrative in our culture that, women have just been oppressed. We've just been, had this boot on our backs, and we were told not to speak up, and we were told, to be quiet. And I can just tell you that nobody in my house ever said anything like that to me or my sister. It was more like, what have you done today, Laura? So I just bring that up to let people, remind people. Sometimes I hear these young women who come to me as clients, come to me with this story about how they were told to be quiet and not to speak up. And I really doubt that's actually factually true. So, I mentioned that to encourage people, just because you hear something over and over again doesn't mean it's not true. So you might want to just take that put it in your pipe and smoke it. So I was a teacher, and then I knew I didn't want to stay in the university. 2008 was a very bad year for the economy. Some of you may be old enough to have been around back then. And as soon as I got my PhD, I was let go, but I had already decided to start my company, which is Mixonian Institute. And I thought, wow, I have the answer to the problem of communication. What am I going to do with all that money that people are going to throw at me because I have the solution? And I didn't know at the time that knowing your craft is one thing, and knowing how to profit from your craft is a whole nother skill set. But I learned it. And actually the things that I learned to build the business have been helpful in helping my clients, who largely work in corporate America or corporate in the world, to be more successful. So that's, a very short version with a little bit of history thrown.
Perfect. Well, and I want to briefly touch on what you said about the women who feel suppressed or unsupported. And I think it boils down to not caring about what other people tell you, because especially nowadays in our digital world, a lot of people tell you what to do, either directly or you compare yourself to others. And I think that's just so toxic. That's something we should not do. We should always go back to our Bibles and see what God has to say about us. And he says a lot of beautiful things about women. And Jesus was very much, an advocate for women and to make sure that they are used in the kingdom as well. So it is about that. Like, that's our foundation, especially for women. Read that and be, encouraged by that and empowered that with God, you will decide what is true for you and what is not, and not based on like what the surrounding is telling you. Right.
Right. That's I want to jump in with a little story, because my husband and I started reading the Bible from the beginning, and my husband is from Venezuela. So English is his second language. Reading in English is not something that he doesn't read as fast as I do. He's reading it out loud, but I didn't know the story of Deborah. So this is in the book of Judges, I think. And there was this woman named Deborah who had a bad guy over like for dinner and gave him wine, and he went to sleep, and she drove a spike through his head to get rid of him. That was not what you would call a, reticent, well-behaved, quiet, repressed woman. I mean, she is a hero in Judaism. So, and that was 3,000 years ago, I think. So yes, don't be careful about where you're getting your information, and social media. You have to be so careful. I have gotten off of Facebook. I went off of Instagram during Lent, and it's just making me so aware, like you mentioned, of, sometimes we need these channels to build our businesses. You have to be so careful about the messaging that you're literally bombarded with constantly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of fasting from social media as well. I've done it a couple times, and it's always really good. After, a month, you come back on the platform, you're like, oh, what am I doing here? But then, you need it for building your business. So that's why you're here, and you can actually put messages out there that are building people up. Like, it doesn't have to be very marketing focused or deceiving people into doing something. Like, that's not what we want to communicate. Right. But I'm also, like you were mentioning Deborah, I'm thinking of Lydia as well. That was mentioned to me before. Like, she was a big business person, basically. She's in charge of retail, like in fabrics. She was a businesswoman as well. And she's mentioned in the Bible as well. I think it's
right. And the Proverbs, was it 30 or 31? I mean, that woman is also just not sitting home and knitting all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just there's so much myth out there.
Yeah. So a communication coach, what is it that you do?
Yes. That question used to make me doubt myself. So there's a little tip there, because back in 2009, when I started my company, people would ask me that, and I would be like, what, is not obvious that people need help with their communication? But it was a new thing, I guess. At the time, there were always public speaking coaches, because if you're going to be a keynote speaker, there can be a lot of money involved, or it can be politically motivated. So there is pressure to get that talk right. But I am a card-carrying certified introvert. And I observed that in a corporation, when there's a lot of people employed, that all other things being equal, the person who is more chatty has a higher probability of getting promoted. And there's, so it's a form of bias if you want to look at it like that. And so I started noticing that there was a huge opportunity to help introverts speak up, not necessarily to become chatterboxes and talk your head off or, change their personality, but to speak with more impact. Because like there's this typical story, and I did experience myself. Let's say you're in a corporate meeting and you have an idea. And so you raise your hand and you mention your idea, and nobody says anything. Nobody acknowledges it. And then somebody else mentions this exact same idea, and people go, oh, that's such a great idea. And you're feeling like, did you not just hear me? And it's because we did didn't sell it. When you're quiet, you tend to economize with your vocabulary and your language, which is good. It means we're more strategic in the way we communicate, but sometimes we're just too sparse and we didn't catch their attention, or we didn't say why your solution was so good. And so it's that kind of thing that I help people with, because if you're in a large company, again, you can make it up to middle management, based on your work results. I only work with high performance people, but once you get to, say, director or senior director, then the communication, the relationship building, the visibility becomes as important, and the results are just table stakes. And so that is where, if you're not skilled at making your point with impact, giving a presentation that people actually remember that they were engaged with, then that can cost you a promotion, or it can hold you back in changing jobs, if that's what you want to do. And then teams often have communication dysfunctions. And so teaching them, the different communication styles, teaching them structure, that it's not just a train of consciousness. That's not what an email is for. It should have a purpose and a structure. And it just helps the communication flow. And just one more example is, I'm so excited because I'm teaching this new course that I developed. It's called C-Suite Communication Boot Camp. And it's for this group of younger professionals who are having to make a presentation to the C-suite, literally, because they were acquired by a big company, and like how to not be intimidated, how to be the trusted advisor to someone who may be a little bit scary to you, and how to structure and your message and be really mindful of service, because I see communication as serving your audience.
I feel that you're an expert on helping people going to the C-suite level. Thinking about it, communication is important anywhere, right? Because you were talking about giving a point with impact, like bringing something across with impact. And I'm wondering, this is something we encounter many times in our life. It could be on the phone when you're like with customer service and you wanted to bring something across. It could be your husband if you want to, convince him of something, of like buying the new car, for example.
Right. Or like you said, what is a communication coach? And I gave you this long answer, but maybe I could, but that's because we're on a podcast. But if we were meeting at a networking event, I would say, did you know that communication is the number one success skill in business today? That's sell it. I have a saying, sell it before you tell it. So you sell the importance of what you're going to say, and then you say it. So communication is the number one success skill. Wouldn't it serve you to be a little bit better at that skill? And I can help you with that.
Yes. Okay. So talking about communication as our most important skill in running a business. And then it's not, when we think about communication, we think a lot about the marketing and the things that are on your website, but we also talk to people every single day.
Yes.
We talk to people that we hire. Maybe we have a team. I wonder what makes communication strong. So how do we communicate strongly? Are there a couple of like go-to tactics that we can learn?
Of course there are. I'm so glad you asked, Jane. And I want to make one preliminary statement that I want every conversation that you have, is if you're a Christian person in business, you definitely want to leave everyone that you talk to better off after they talk to you than they were before, even if you have to give them a message that they don't want to hear. So that's kind of a philosophical approach to the way I teach communication. And it points to the fundamental quality that you need to be a strong communicator is to have a purpose, and the purpose is not, my elevator pitch. No, the purpose is to serve people. The purpose is to let people know how you can help them and help them make the decision on whether you should work together or not. That could be one purpose. Another purpose could be, I want to talk to Jane to see, maybe I'm interviewing you to see if you would be a good employee. So my purpose is to find out what are your values? What is your working style? So I have that purpose of, talking to you to find out if we would be a good fit for each other. And if we're not, that maybe I can refer you somewhere else, or maybe I can give you some pointers that would help you be more successful in a future job interview. So everyone listening to this, with your communication, you want to be clear. What is your purpose? If it's giving feedback, let's say that Jane works for me and she's always late. And so I tell her, Jane, I love working with you. I see so much potential in you. I want you to be successful, but this being late every day is not helping you. And if you don't resolve this now, it's going to hurt you later. So it's in your interest to correct this behavior. That's any feedback should have, just like a parent doesn't make the kid eat the spinach just because it's green or because that's what you were told to do. It's because spinach is good for you.
So would it be helpful if you are to have a conversation that at the beginning of a conversation, you're going to lay out the purpose? You're going to say, this is the purpose of the conversation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's a form of selling it before you tell it, because everybody in their head is going, why is Jane talking? Why is she talking to me? Why do I need to be listening? That's what's going on in their head. And unless you're giving out free money. Now, if you're giving out $100 bills, you can ignore everything I've said and everybody will understand you. But otherwise, yes, speak your purpose. Your purpose is why you're speaking, and that should be attractive in some way to your audience.
Okay, so first off, to communicate strongly, we have to know our purpose.
Yes.
Why are we communicating? Then, do we have a second one?
Well, the second one would be, what is the benefit of that purpose to your audience? Mm-hmm. So if I need to give you feedback, that is my purpose. But the benefit to you is that you're going to be a stronger professional, or maybe I can help you be a stronger communicator so that you close more sales, or that you get you have fewer misunderstandings at work, or you just feel more confident and more assured about what you're saying. So the purpose, the benefit to the audience, and then your message. And then another key skill for being a strong communicator is to ask questions. Sometimes we get ourselves wrapped up into a knot when we could just ask a question, a clarifying question, than maybe answering when we're not sure where this is going, or we're not sure the purpose, or we're not sure the benefit. Instead of trying to answer it, maybe just ask a clarifying question.
Yeah, I think asking questions is so important. And then especially, I think asking open questions.
Yes.
Like what, how, those type of questions, because it will show that you're interested in what the other person has to say, and the other person doesn't feel offended if you ask a question for clarification, right?
Right, exactly. And then you have something to work with. Like if we're disagreeing about, the way something is done. Oh, let's say we'll use the performance review. Let's say I'm, picking on you since you're the host of the post. Let's say that Jane works for me and she thinks that she is the best email writer ever. Like on a scale of 1 to 6, she says she's a 6, but I'm her boss and I see like a 4 or 3 because she lets a lot of spelling errors get by. So instead of just saying, Jane, how do you see Jane, you need to improve your writing, your email writing. I say, Jane, how do you see yourself writing the emails? And you explained that to me. And then I say, that's interesting, Jane, but I think the way I see it as your boss, your emails should have, for you to be a 5 out of 5, we would have 0 spelling errors. Have you heard of Grammarly?
Yeah.
It's getting at it instead of just, dishing out this message, pouring it on somebody, getting their engagement, getting their point of view first is so helpful. And especially if you're in sales or you're trying to sell your own service, find out their pain points. And then you can tailor what you're going to say, because you know a lot more than they do, but you don't have time to tell them everything you know. You have to curate.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it's have a purpose. What is the benefit of your message for the other person? Bring your message, and then it's ask questions is really important.
Yes, those are, if you just take those 3 things, you can become president, because you can take those and just leverage the heck out of them, because you're going to be clear, you're going to be selling it before you tell it, and you're going to get engagement. So a really good communicator, especially in a public speaking context, is educating, right? Educating on what you do, or the quarterly results, or your software coding that you've done. You're educating your audience, you're engaging them in your topic. And then the master skill, which is hard to do, but it's so needed, and that's to be a little bit entertaining. Think about C.S. Lewis. That guy, his books are, he's not, telling us anything really that we didn't know, but he's super entertaining.
Yeah.
And we have a lack of that. Everybody is, the culture is very serious right now.
And I feel those first 2 points, you can learn that, but being entertaining is something I think you have to practice.
Yes.
Being more comfortable in what you're telling, and then you also enjoy it yourself, and you might become more entertaining. I think that's
exactly. That's good job.
Oh, okay. Yes. I was just guessing here.
And the thing is that being entertaining, being relaxed enough to tell a joke, even if it's a bad one, can communicate supreme confidence, because it just shows that you're relaxed a little bit. But that entertaining aspect is where you get a little twist, a little unexpected, a little, let's relax. Because remember, a relaxed audience is more receptive to your message. So that's another reason to learn some ways to put everybody at ease when you're speaking.
Okay, so communication, as we said already, is like many different forms. It's written, it's verbal, it can be speaking. So we can learn how to communicate. I think it becomes easier to communicate one-on-one, but if you have to communicate to a bigger group, there might be, people have different filters, different lenses. And nowadays, I feel sometimes we have to tiptoe around people to say the right things. There are so many sensitive topics that we could talk about, how to go about that. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. How do we communicate strongly, but also confident, and still get across a message that's not hurting the other people in a good way, in a world like today, where we talked about this, where we also use or not use gender neutral language and things like that. I love to hear your viewpoint on this.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, Jane, because if we don't learn to address sensitive topics and we just keep sweeping them under the carpet, we're going to all have our mouths taped shut. It's really, if you don't use your right to speak your mind, then you will lose it, as we're seeing. I'm not to overstate, it's not like everybody's lost their right to speech, but the fact that you're asking me this question means that people feel afraid to say certain things, and that's what we're going to talk about. So you have to, again, go to your purpose, and I don't want anybody to listen to this and go tell their boss the quote unquote truth and then lose their job. So that's not what we're about. Nevertheless, you want to learn to speak the truth, but maybe at a deeper level. The thing is, right now there's a lot of games going on where people ask you if you support this cause or if you support this group, and then it's like, if you say yes, you're in trouble, and if you say no, you're in trouble, and it's just like never acceptable. So you want to avoid those word games and go deeper. So one of the topics that I have spoken out about is gender neutral language, and I've posted on LinkedIn. That is my main channel. So if you're on LinkedIn, please let's connect on that. And here's the thing. Okay, gender neutral language. The purpose of that, ostensibly, or we're sold that, is to erase discrimination against one gender or the other. However, yes, you can have what we know of as unintended consequences. And if we stop using the word woman, for example, then the word woman, then women in a way cease to exist. And I'm just using that word because I have a personal interest in keeping the word woman alive, because I think women are great. Men are too, but the word woman is one that people are, in some situations, saying it's not gender neutral. So before that comes to my house, before that comes to my business, I am out there saying, if you cannot name something, then that thing does not exist for you. Think about, like, some societies, they don't perceive the color blue. I think they just see green. And so they don't have that color. And so they have a society where the word blue doesn't exist, or the word in Spanish, procrastinate. There's no real word for that. Procrastinating is not really a thing. But I don't want it to be where, well, being a woman is not really a thing. Yes, it is. And here's just one example. Let's say you have a new puppy. So that puppy, I promise you, will have like a dozen different names. Oh, the little cappuccino, little poochie peachy, banana, my darling.
Yeah.
Yes, we will have so many names. Or I have 2 baby granddaughters, and we call them all, both of them are just the cutest babies that were ever born. And we have dozens of names for them because they are important to us.
Mm-hmm.
So when something is important to you, you have more words for it, not fewer. And the more you reduce the number of words to describe something, the less importance that thing has. So I am taking on gender neutral language and putting out there, woman is a word, woman is a thing. It's not XN, it's WOMAN. So that's just something that I speak on, but I don't, attack people on it. But I do mention, like the puppy example, what could be so charming, but it's still making the point that if you don't have a name for it, you don't value it. Sure, I do a lot of workshops on culture. And there's a lot of issues, sensitive topics related to culture. But what I say is the truth. I say a healthy culture is one where everyone feels heard, understood, and valued, even if there is disagreement. So that's not addressing any specific group of people. It's not expressing any kinds of norms, but we want everyone to feel heard, valued, understood, and we want there to be, the freedom to disagree.
And I wonder, so if you're outspoken about that, that for you, a woman, the words should still exist. I mean, I agree. We should not erase it or something because it is clearly something that we need in our language. I wonder if you are outspoken about that on your LinkedIn and people do disagree, like how do you go about that? Because then it starts again about, it's about communicating and making sure that people still feel like valued, you still feel heard.
Yes.
Like how does that work?
Well, let's say that I'm posting on that and Jane is like, wow, but that's not nice to, so-and-so. I say, Jane, maybe you're right. Maybe you're fully entitled to your opinion. The way I see it, I want the word woman to exist and I want people to use it. And I'm a woman, but you don't have to agree with me. No, you don't have to. That's what, you're not, you can only work with the willing. And as far as evangelization, I don't think that's going to happen at that level, but you can give people, they don't have to agree with you, but you have the right to say what you want to say. So I would, be kind. I would address other people's concerns the best you can, allowing them full freedom to disagree with you and, not look for fights on social media. And LinkedIn is the most, respectful outlet, I believe. I've gotten some nasty message, but only through the private, not in public. So you need to be careful, but you also need to not give up your right to free speech.
Yeah, I feel so communication, we might feel that we want to include everybody that we can, right? But there is also a point where you're like, we have to acknowledge that we can't satisfy everybody. And
Correct.
Maybe we're afraid to not be able to satisfy everybody, but that's communication is what that means as well. Sometimes you let people down, or maybe you disagree with people, and that is communicating too.
Yes, and you give them permission not to like you.
Yeah, but it can be hard. I mean, I think that comes back to like you have to be confident in who you are and what you speak about.
Yes. Yes.
So you can be disliked, and that's part of life as well. It's part of being an entrepreneur. People might not like you, might not like your business or the things that you do. We don't have to care about what people think of us and whether they like us or not. The ultimate goal for us is, we meet God and he will say, well done, good and faithful servant.
Yes. Amen. That's the ultimate message there that we're trying to get out.
So Laura, maybe people are listening and they think, I want to speak to Laura, or I want to know where I can find more about what she does, or maybe she has like a couple of tips or freebies, giveaways. Like, where can they go? Where can they find out more about you? Or can they sign up for a workshop, or can they get coaching? Tell us.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. So one easy way to find me is Laura Camacho, PhD, on LinkedIn. I have a red blazer on. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. And there, in my profile, there's a free download for how to give a talk without being boring. If you go to my website, however, which is www.m as in Mary, IXONIAN.com. There's also a sign up for, write a newsletter every week with communication tip every week. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's short. And let me I'll close on this little entrepreneurial story for those of you who are afraid of making a mistake. Well, Mixonian Institute is the name of my company. And my first business coach told me that was a terrible name because for obvious reasons, it's hard to pronounce and to spell. But I stuck to it because I liked it, because I was a big fan of the Smithsonian Institute when I was young, and my maiden name is Mixon, so I created Mixonian. So the last time I talked to a business coach about that, he said, Laura, it's so bad that it works. So you can be a communication specialist and not name your company properly and still be successful.
That's funny because I'm always like, I used to teach on branding or like help people with their branding. And people would ask me, a lot of people would ask me, Jay, what do you think about this name for my company? And I would say, it doesn't really matter. Like, pick a name and make it work. What do you think if you didn't know Apple? Like, if somebody told you, I'm going to name my company Apple, what would you think? You would think, what? Is that a computer company?
I would say that.
And then, look at what it is right now today. So I love that you just told this story, and that will probably help a lot of people who are doubting their name for their business.
Right. Just go with it.
Exactly. You'll make it work. And yours has actually a cute story to it as well.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for being on the podcast and for sharing all your wisdom and tips. And I hope people will sign up for the newsletter and get engaged with what you're doing, become better communicators. And
that's right.
Yeah. And you've written 2 books, so they can look that up as well. And
Oh, that's right. The book, let me just give a shout out. It's called The Practical Guide to Effective Communication. It's on Amazon, and there will be a link in my LinkedIn profile and on the website. But yeah, that has my approach. And there's no woke language. There's nothing politically correct. And yet there's nothing incorrect either. It's just me being me. It's me speaking from the heart and with my, with my point of view. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I will link all the things that you said in the podcast notes so people can find it there, one click away, and they'll go to your website. So again, thank you so much, Laura.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Born to Fly podcast. If you liked it, please leave a review on Google Podcast or Apple Podcast. And don't forget to share it with your friends. If you'd like to know more about Born to Fly, go to borntofly.faith. There you can discover our How to Find Your Calling course and a community for like-minded entrepreneurs. Looking forward to having you back next time.